This is but a taste of the terror that Saruman will unleash. All the more potent for he is driven now by fear of Sauron. Ride out and meet him head on. Draw him away from your women and children. You must fight.
You have 2,000 good men riding north as we speak. Emmer is loyal to you. His men will return and fight for their king.
They will be 300 leagues from here by now. Eomer cannot help us. I know what it is you want of me, but I will not bring further death to my people. I will not risk open war.
Open war is upon you, whether you would risk it or not.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your archbishop of Banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, your sommelier of cinema and science fiction, your pharaoh of physical media, and of course, your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett. And I am Rob casting at you. You imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. Welcome to Robservations episode number 573 in our march to episode 600. You know, I can't help but feel that storm clouds are gathering. Storm clouds are gathering all around Hollywood. COVID only exacerbated these things. It's thrown the entire industry this week into a tizzy. And I have to say, as basically a journeyman filmmaker, always scraping the bottom of the barrel to make ends meet, never one who's really entered the echelons of real Hollywood royalty, I'm always interested to watch the machinations of the business. Because as I say, I am a fan of Hollywood. I've been a fan of the business of Hollywood, not just movies, but the business of Hollywood. And I've always felt that nobody gets in its own way, or nobody gets in their own way. No business gets in its own way more than Hollywood does. And it's really interesting because Hollywood is this incredible, I don't know, conflagration, I guess, between art and commerce. And both sides need one another, but never the two shall meet. Sometimes they do. There are sometimes creative people do very interesting things, like Peter Jackson using enormous sums of other people's money to build his own infrastructure, that he's able to make 6 movies that basically gross $1 billion each before they hit ancillary markets, and then he builds an infrastructure that he can then rent to other people. Genius. But for the most part, Hollywood has worked a certain way for a long time. Now, one of the things that Hollywood relied upon, and when I say Hollywood, I mean the studio system, the studios that are making the big, grand entertainments. And the reason that Hollywood has basically maintained control over movies and television for such a long period of time is because they control the distribution of material. They're the people that are relied upon to give the materials they make and put it into a distribution system. You can't just go to a movie theater chain and say, well, hello, I've made my low-budget indie movie. I would love for you to play it in your theaters. It doesn't really work that way. I mean, you can four-wall it and pay for it yourself, but you're not going to make any money that way. So one of the great things that Hollywood has had is the things that come from the major studios or the major providers get distribution. They have access to distribution and the big distribution entities. So Hollywood is sort of your gateway to distributing your material. And that's one of the most important aspects of where Hollywood is at. Now, what Hollywood was doing was distributing to other places, other networks. They were distributing to movie theaters. They were sending products all over the place to foreign entities, strip syndication. Like if you made a TV show, TV shows usually are made, it's a deficit spend for the first couple of years. But if you have a television series that, say, gets to year 5, then you start selling that syndicate, you sell it overseas, and then the real money starts to roll in because you sell the same series over and over again. You sell it to Germany, you sell it to France, you sell it to the UK, to the Netherlands, you sell it to wherever, Sweden, Denmark, Japan, Korea, and each one of those territories is a different sale. So you're getting more money. So you can see it racks up pretty quickly, depending on the deals that you're making. Well, what's happening now, what we're seeing happen now, is all of the methods of distribution and getting material to consumers is changing. And remember, before, studios, because of the Paramount decrees, couldn't even own theaters because they couldn't be the manufacturers and then be in charge of distribution. They would have a monopoly over their whole product. So the theaters were no longer able to be owned by studios. So studios had to go through a different entity, usually theater chains, to sell their movies to the public. Well, what streaming has done, and the world of streaming, it's done something that really never existed before. And I think the most important element of that was what we saw Disney emphasize all day yesterday, which is a direct-to-consumer experience. And there's probably no better company in the world than Disney, because Disney has been providing a direct-to-consumer experience for a long time, a curated, very carefully crafted experience, mostly at their theme parks. Consumers show up, Disney lets them in, and Disney controls the entire experience of what it means to go into one of their theme parks on many, many, many different levels. Now, and remember, their theme parks were really just sort of adjacent to, there wouldn't be Disney theme parks without the entertainment that they'd created, whether it was Mickey Mouse, whether it was the first animated feature film in Snow White that they had done, then of course Pinocchio and the characters that they carefully curated and crafted and built over time. Then in the 50s, you make a theme park out of it all. But people already knew all of those things because they were already in the pop culture zeitgeist because they began in the visual medium, in animation and later live action. And then Disney spun it out and merchandised it. And suddenly they weren't just movies or theme park experiences. They became cultural touchstones and icons. It was amazing. But it all began with the dreams that celluloid, at the time celluloid, then it was later television, provided. The characters, they lived in your imagination. They never went away. So everything sprung out of those images. Same thing was true of the studios. They had to have movies. They were selling the great stars of the silver screen, whether it was people like Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart or George and Gracie. I mean, Errol Flynn, name it. There's so many. Hope and Crosby. I mean, you could go Betty Davis and All About Eve. It's going to be a bumpy night. Well, you know what? Hollywood's having a bumpy year. And fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night. Best Picture, 1950, by the way. So it really begins with, as always, content. You have to have content. Now, what happened was the business of Hollywood, the business that grew up around this. I can't believe someone's calling me. You know what? I always get depressed when people call me, friends of mine, because they wonder, I'm like, they don't even watch my show. People that should know, but they don't. But so the absolute ability to create the content that connects with people is the basis of your business. And if you look at all of the things that are going on, all of these businesses around Hollywood, whether it's streaming services like HBO Max, whether it's movie theaters that need content, it all starts with the content. You have to have the content first. But what's really interesting is the content can't be created without the cheddar. You need the money. You need the economic power. You have to be able to wield the money to create that content because it is not cheap. So there's a dance. The people that can provide the money to make the content really are not, although they want to be, they're not creators themselves. It's diametrically opposed disciplines. Creating art and paying and getting the money to pay for that art and then profiting from the art that you've made is not easy. And usually the artists, sure, we want to be remunerated for our work. That's always a good thing. But usually the people that are making the movies, yeah, they want to get rich, but nobody gets into making movies if they just are in it for the money. Movie making is too hard. It's too aggravating. It's too difficult. It takes too long. It takes too much concentration. It has to be all-consuming. There are better, easier, more fulfilling ways to lead your life, probably. And the business side of it is worse than that. Worse than that. I can't think of a worse business than Hollywood because you'd think that it would only be driven by money. Like at the bottom line, if you want to do business with me, I will do business with you. But the problem is Hollywood also has its frothy mix, has a lot of things that make it a lot more attractive than, say, investment banking. For people like myself, actresses. No, but the people, the glitz, the glamour, all the byproducts of making the good content over here and having the money over here add to the mystique of Hollywood. And one of the great difficulties of working in Hollywood is, as someone like myself who's always dreamed of making movies, I am a chump because I will do anything in order to get over here and make things. And I don't worry so much about the money. And I'm like, please, sir, just let me make my movie. I'll work 80 hours a week for you for less than minimum wage as long as I can make my film. Please. Oh, if it's going to take 5 years, I'll get other jobs. I'll subsidize your movie for you. It's fine. They're the artists, like myself. I consider myself an artist. By the way, I don't believe in calling myself an artist. That's for you to decide. I hate when people call themselves artists, but for this conversation, I will just say artist. But then there's all these other people, like, say you're born into a rich family, and you want to come out to LA and dabble in Hollywood. There's plenty of people that'll take your money. But if you're not really interested, most people have money that come out to Hollywood. It's fun for a while, but then everybody wants your money, and then you're left with nothing, and you wonder what the hell happened to you. So I always advise people, if you really want to get involved with Hollywood, first and foremost, you have to love movies. Movies for their own sake. If you want to get into content creation or making content, you have to love the finished product. Because the only thing that you're going to have at the end of the day that will fulfill you is having something that you can show to other people that bring them pleasure, and you can say, I helped make that. Whether you're a financier or whether you're involved in the creation of the product, the only way you can lead a happy life in Hollywood, this is my own supposition, this is my own feeling, that if you do not enjoy the process of making films or television or whatever content you're making, documentaries, whatever it is, if you don't enjoy the process of it and you don't enjoy the satisfaction that it brings you for your own sake, see, you're never going to be happy. You're always going to be wherever you're going to be. And I think if you want to watch a movie, I think one of the movies that perfectly encapsulates this is a movie that Barry Levinson directed that not a lot of people have seen, that stars Robert De Niro and a cast of, it's got Bruce Willis and Michael Wincott in it. What's not to love? But there's a movie called What Just Happened. Robert De Niro basically plays a fictionalized version of Art Linson. It's based on his book. Watch this movie if you want to learn what it's like to try and lead a life and have a career in Hollywood. Watch What Just Happened. I cannot stress enough how much fun or how it's either a horror movie or it's not. But watch what happened. Watch what just happened. But the one thing about Hollywood is there's two Hollywoods. There are the people that make the movies. There's people that work in production. Then there's the directors and the people that actually are making the movies. And then you have the other side of Hollywood, which is the business side, the managers, the agents, the financiers, the studio executives, all of those people. And what's very funny about Hollywood is they don't really meet. The money people and the creative people, the people that are actually making the content, some of them do, but for the most part, like if you go onto a film set, there's a whole wonderful group of people, artisans, technicians, very talented people. I love being on movie sets. People will say movie sets are the most boring place in the world. I don't think so. One of my favorite places in life to be is on a set or in an edit bay. I mean, in addition to the Robservatory, this is also my edit bay. I got my screens here. I get to sit here and I edit every day. I edit something every day, whether it's a trailer for Tango Shalom, which you'll be seeing shortly, whether it's an animated show, whether it's, a YouTube series. I'm doing something all the time. This is sort of my little command post. And if I could stay here for the rest of my life, pretty much, and go out to eat and enjoy family time or something, but then come back here and just work on films, I would do it. I would be happy as a clam. But there's a lot of people who wouldn't be. So what we're seeing now, what has happened in Hollywood this week, and it has been going on for a long time, is an explosion, the inevitability of the warfare that is going to happen between the people that can actually make the content, because let's make no mistake, the people that can make the content are way more important to Hollywood than the people on the other side, the financiers, the agents, the managers, because all of those people, that entire ecosystem is built upon the work that they're doing over here. And these are the people that are always abused, and these are the people that always get fucked over by these people. And make no mistake, and I can tell you as an independent filmmaker, no independent feature that I've ever worked on has ever wound up making the money it deserved to make, because the people over here are never, ever looking out for the people over here. The creatives will always get fucked. And the whole idea is the best thing you can do is become a creative that does not ever have to listen to the people over here. Now, that's a very difficult thing to be able to achieve. My greatest cinematic hero, Stanley Kubrick, didn't have to listen to these people. But that's because his movies weren't expensive. And he was, whether his movies were great or not, whether you love them or not, he was left alone. He was left alone with his small crews and his family, and he made his movies and delivered them, and they're some of the best movies that were ever made. But that's a hard place to be. But right now, what we're watching on a number of levels, everything over here is starting to crumble. It's starting to fall apart because these ways of doing things were old and antiquated. And just like what happened in Napster, or what happened with Napster and file sharing and all that, the music industry did not anticipate how fast their business was going to completely collapse. And the business that they'd relied on, and how many times did they ask any musician in a successful band, how are they treated by these people when they are first starting out? Not well. But what's happening is the real shift in power that we're seeing is that these people who are actually making the content are going to eventually be more important than anybody over here, except the people that have the money to finance things. Because, well, we'll get into it. Now, this week, we've all heard what happened when Warner Brothers announced they decided day and date their movies for 2021, 17 movies were going to go day and date, both in the theaters and on streaming, beginning with Wonder Woman 1984. Now, as people have been talking about on different YouTube channels, pundits everywhere, the problem with that is the deals that are made in Hollywood, especially for above-the-line talent, they have bonus things and other perks built into their deals. So if you make a movie that makes, when it gets to $100 million, you get a certain, say, salary bump. And there's guild rules like the WGA, the DGA. They've all got rules and things that come into play, all based on various models that have existed for a long time. There's the theatrical model and what can happen in the theater. There's the home video model, how much you get when something goes to home video. There's all different kinds of deals. There's probably as many different deals as there are people, but they're all based on how the system works. Well, what is happening now is that system is being rapidly dismantled. And a lot of people are wondering, okay, well, how are we going to get paid? Because as we've talked about on this channel and every other channel, when a movie is expected to make $1 billion at the box office, and it doesn't, indeed, the box office is almost entirely removed or deeply hobbled by the idea of being coming on day and date with streaming. You're going to lose, regardless, you're going to lose your audience. And not to mention we're in a pandemic, so who knows when movie theaters are going to get back up to the levels they were in 2019, which was a very lucrative time indeed for the business. Now, what I was wondering when this first went down was, I'm like, okay, well, how are they going to be able to sustain? How is it going to work? Like, how is talent going to get paid when theatrical doesn't mean the same thing, whether it comes back or not? If your movie is going out day and date on streaming, what about box office bumps? How much are people going to get? What if you're a financier? You know, if you've like your Legendary Pictures and you've gone out and you have, say, 10 different companies backing you and giving you the 75% of the budgets that Legendary is paying to the movies that Warner Brothers are making. Well, how do you get your money back in time? And if you become a company that's been told people like, okay, we need this much money from you, we're making this movie, we expect this box office, when that box office goes away, then how do you go back to your people that invested in you? They're going to want their money. And if you can't rely on the return that you had when you first started out, when you first started making the movie and you're working with a studio and they know that, okay, Wonder Woman 84 by all intents, or for all intents and purposes, is going to make $1 billion at the box office. So you tell your initial investors, okay, we're putting 75% of the budget in. We know that at this release date, this movie's going to come out and it's going to be guaranteed to make at least this. What is the floor? What is the ceiling? But it's going to make probably, assuming we got the same creative team, Patty Jenkins on down, Gal Gadot, Steve Trevor's back, Chris Pine. Why would you not believe that it's going to make the same amount of money that the first one did? So it's a pretty good bet you're going to make between, say, $850 and $1 billion. So you can tell people that. Well, what happens when a worldwide global pandemic comes? Well, then you can, declare force majeure or whatever you want. But at the end of the day, you're out. But then you say, okay, we'll wait a year. So everybody's waiting and they wait and they'll postpone it, and then a studio like Warner Brothers and HBO Max just decide to go day and date and change the rules of the game. They don't even call you. They don't even tell you. People who get venereal diseases and tell their partners to go get checked have more consideration than Warner Brothers and HBO Max did with their creative people over here. Once again, I felt bad. I can't imagine what it's like to be Denis Villeneuve and suddenly be treated like an independent filmmaker. When you have a long-standing relationship with Warner Brothers, you're in the middle of making your film for theatrical release for them to make money because, well, you're loving it because you're a creator, so you've got all the money, you've got all the wherewithal, but the thing is, every decision that you've made on that movie for the last 3 years of your life has been about putting it on a big screen for an audience, a packed audience of people having a collective experience. That's why you're doing what you're doing in the first place. Sure, do you want to get paid? Yes. But, it's not like Denis Villeneuve said, I'm going to go tackle Dune because of the paycheck. No, he wanted to tackle Dune because it was a passion project for him. It was a calling. And it's nice to get paid for that, but it's not why anybody does the things in the motion picture industry they do, because it's it's the hardest way in the world to make money, and even to get rich, to get really rich, it's even harder. So why bother? People do it because they love it. So I reached out to, I talked about this on the John Campea show, but I'm going to start here because I think it's a good place to start. I have a relatively new friend in the entertainment business who I consider to be, like, I think his opinions about how the business works are unassailable. He knows way more than I will ever know about deal making and basically becoming successful in Hollywood. And I'm not stupid. When I want to ask questions from a perspective of a very successful industry insider, I go to this person and I ask. So here was the question, and here's what I wrote to this person the other day. And also, after what happened with Warner Brothers, a lot of people are up in arms. And CAA, Richard Lovett, who runs CAA, wrote a letter that I read on this show the other day about how they're shocked, blindsided, disappointed about what Warner Brothers had done, and they're going to side with their clients. Of course, because CAA lives and dies based on the creative work or the athletic work or whatever their clients do. So if their clients are getting boned by the people they're working for, CAA is always going to side with their clients, for the most part, unless they have a packaging deal with Warner Brothers. It's a sick business. But anyway, so this is what I wrote. I said, with CAA basically drawing a line in the sand against Warner Brothers, do you think Warner Media will be more transparent with their future plans? And will they be making concessions to their talent? As in, will they just pay off things like performance bumps and expect to just pay out a few billion more dollars over 2021 as just the cost of doing business? Obviously, AT&T is more interested in their communications infrastructure and their subscribers than the business of Hollywood, but curious to get your insights. And then I said, also, do you think HBO Max will eventually develop a contract model like phone services do, sign on for 1, 2, or 3 years? That's what I wrote to this person. And I was talking with somebody that because AT&T is AT&T and because your subscription base is really the most important thing for these, the reason why subscribers, obviously, it's pretty obvious why they're so important to a streaming service is because Disney, any business, and the great thing about like Disney owns all of their content that they're putting on Disney Plus. So they're not licensing it from someone else. Like Netflix in 2019, Netflix paid the owners of Friends, all the people, the producers, the actors, to show Friends for 1 year on Netflix in 2019. Netflix paid $100 million. That's a licensing fee. They didn't make Friends. They didn't pay for it. They just paid. And how old is Friends? That's how valuable having a great show like Friends that people will still watch years after the fact is to a streaming service. How valuable is it? It's worth $100 million a year for Netflix. Now imagine, look at how much content Netflix has. Imagine paying those licensing fees for 40 shows. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot of money. But that's what Netflix is facing. They're not just paying to make shows. They're also paying all kinds of licensing fees for other people's shows. Now, what Netflix wants to do is not do that. They want to have enough of their own content that eventually, sometime in the future, they won't be paying licensing fees because everyone is still coming back and watching The Queen's Gambit because they made that. Just like they made Scott Frank's previous show, Godless. And the more that Netflix owns, the less licensing fees they have to pay, and the more money, the more profit they will show. The thing about Disney Plus is, though, everything they've got, they own. What they pay for, they own. They put it on their streaming service, and the reason the streaming services are so important is because it's an ongoing, relatively stable revenue stream. So every month you can go, oh, we have 100 million subscribers, and those 100 million subscribers are paying, say, $10 a month. That's $1 billion a month. That, from any business standpoint, is pretty stable. That's a stable business to be in. It's not volatile. Like, you make an independent movie. Like, here's the problem with an independent film. If I'm an independent filmmaker, here's the problem that I face. So I go out and I convince my mom's friends, my parents, my mom and dad's friends, people at my synagogue, anybody I can get to kick in some cash to make my $2 million movie. You know, friends and family rates, whatever. So you've raised $2 million to make your dream project. Now, let's assume that your dream project is competently made. Maybe it has an actor in it people recognize, but it's relatively well made. And it turns out great. Everything about it's good. Everybody who participated in the film recognized the fact that it's great. So now you have your $2 million movie, your $2 million investment. Well, what do you do with it? How do you get your money back? You know, you've convinced people to give you $2 million. You even made a great movie. It's great. People love it. Well, then what do? You have to find distribution for it. And you can't just find distribution for it. You have to find distribution for it so you can get your money back. So you can pay all your investors back. And in my case, my model is 30% on their money. So for everybody that gave you $1, you got to give them $1.30 back. So here's the thing. Most movies that cost $2 million or under or whatever are not the kind of movies, some are, I'm not saying that everyone isn't, like, hey, you know, John Carpenter's Halloween was certainly Dawn of the Dead, horror movies that can break through if you can find distribution, if they're good enough where Avco Embassy came to you and said, wow, dude, that's pretty good. I mean, I like this movie. We're going to buy it. So you need distribution, because if you made a movie, it's no good. It's no good unless audiences can see it. The act of making a film presupposes an audience, that you're going to go for an audience. You're going to try and make an audience happy. Don't be one of those people who's like, well, you know, I made this film for me. It's just like I write. I don't write for anybody else to read it. I write it for me. But when you're making a movie, you can't make it just for you. You have to make it for an audience. And if you're borrowing other people's money, that's what you need to do. So where we're at now this week is all of these traditional things are in flux. But for me, the independent filmmaker, I see all of this as a great opportunity, because Hollywood has only ever screwed over me and all my friends who are independent filmmakers. Maybe someone will break through. You know, maybe you'll make a Sex Lies and Videotape. Maybe you'll make a Swingers for a couple $100,000 and somebody will buy it for $5 million, and then that's an epic win. Or in the case of us, I have a movie I'm producing, or I did produce, that's is about to begin playing at festivals. All the rights are available. We would love to sell our movie. You know, I can imagine, I mean, if we sold it for $3 million, everybody would be, wow, that was an epic win, you know? But the thing is, you have to get distribution. If you made a movie, it's no good without distribution. Who has controlled distribution? Well, you have low-budget film companies that would acquire your film, distributors. There used to be a ton of them. 40 years ago, you know, you could make a horror movie and you could get it and play drive-ins and make money, assuming you had somebody, a partner that wasn't going to screw you. I'll tell you a funny thing. So when we made Free Enterprise, let's million dollar-esque movie. So when it was acquired by our distribution company, they would take our movie to, along with their 10 other movies they acquired, to, say, the film market, to the Cannes film market. Our movie did very well for them. But the thing is, they've also got 9 other movies to sell. And what ends up happening is we don't just get credit for our movie. What they do is they say, well, you know, your movie might have sold for $300,000, but these other movies sold for $50,000 a piece, but we're still here. We're still here in Cannes. So your movie, we got to pay for our overhead. We have to pay for all this other stuff that we have to incur our expenses before we start paying you. And they do things like, well, we made a video sale and we bundled 8 of our movies together. And we're like, yeah, but our movie was your most valuable. Yeah, but it's part of our bundle. I mean, there's so many, I could tell you so many stories about how distributors for independent films, their job was not to pay their filmmakers. It goes on and on and on and on and on. Well, let me just say that as somebody who's made a movie, let's say I made a movie for $1 million and people liked it. It had names in it or something. If a streaming service came along and said, hey, Rob, we like your movie. here's $3 million. If that were to happen, so what I get from that, it's just I'm selling the movie in perpetuity throughout the universe forever. I made it for $1 million. I get $3 million for it. So I give back my investors their money, which is I give them back the $1 million plus $300,000. They're happy, and now I am left with $1,700,000 that I split up amongst everybody I assume were paid to work on the film, and maybe I can put a nice chunk of change in my pocket. So if I've made an independent movie for $1 million and I sell it for $3 million, for me, that's a win. That's an epic win. That never happens unless you make a big sale up front to a Miramax or somebody or one of the many. Right now, my dream in life would be to make a movie that A24 would acquire. And by the way, they still wouldn't give me probably $3 million for my $1 million movie unless, I had some big splash at some festival. But either way, I love A24. I think they've got great taste. So it'd be great to make a movie for somebody like an A24. Well, actually, I'd probably make a movie and A24 would then acquire it. But if I made a movie that they thought was good enough to acquire, that would be great. But as far as independent films go, if I could go to a streamer, that would be great. There's a lot of great opportunity there because I raised my own money. I made my own film. I didn't have an agent when I made it. No one packaged it for me. So I'm dealing direct with the buyer who's going to put my movie directly on a streaming platform and give it to a consumer. So as an independent filmmaker, bring on the streamers, man, because they're always going to need content. And if I can get in and show that I can produce good content, I can find a platform where I can always go, here's my new movie, because what you want as a filmmaker to be over here, the creative side, I just want to be able to get my material out into distribution so everybody can see it. So for me, as an independent filmmaker, going into a streaming service would be great because I don't have to worry about what theaters they're gonna go to and how much money they're gonna spend on advertising. I don't have to worry about any of that. It's gonna go onto a streaming service, and that's their problem to promote it. Hopefully it does well, so they'll come back to me and they're like, Rob, you got really good numbers. And by the way, they know within a couple of days whether you got really good numbers. And if they go, wow, for us, this did really, really well, we would like you to make another movie for us. And then they might say, here's $5 million. Now, if they give me $5 million and I spend their money, there is no more. It's whatever I make at the time, whatever my deal is, that's it, and then sell it to them. But if I'm making something for a streaming service and give it to them, I don't have to worry. It's one and done. That's why Dave Chappelle is a huge fan of Netflix. That's why he said, I love Netflix. And when I asked them to not play the Chappelle show, Netflix is like, this guy is a huge lucrative draw for us. We pay him a lot. We pay him what he's worth. We get from him what we want from him. And of course we're going to do what he says because, man, we need him as our talent. He doesn't need us. He'll go somewhere else. But we need him. So Netflix is not going to fuck over Dave Chappelle. Netflix is going to be like, yo, man, you want us to take off the Chappelle show? We'll do it. For you, yes. Well, that's the kind of relationship that creatives want with their studios, partners, whatever. And seldom do they have that because the studios, the people that work at the studios, it isn't such a direct line to the consumer. So the people on the studio side, they're trying to get theirs, while the creative people are trying to make theirs. So, but if you can go direct to a streamer, it's a different experience. Anyway, I'm kind of off in the weeds. But so the answer that I got back about my question about CA drawing a line in the sand and what was the answer going to be, this person wrote me back. And I do consider his opinion rather unimpeachable. What he has to say is usually quite savvy, and the proof is in the pudding. Just trust me on that one. This person says, it's been a nutty few days, and it has only been intensifying as the litigators are trying to get hired by the aggrieved parties. I've talked to some people who weren't that pissed off when it was initially announced. This is the Warner Brothers HBO Max deal. But when they get calls from lawyers telling them what they can do if they were hired as their litigators, the people get angrier and angrier. Warner Brothers will either pay out the back ends like they did for Wonder Woman 84 and The Witches, or they will have to backtrack and not do this streaming plan. I don't see a middle ground. What he means there is that the box office bumps that Gal Gadot and Patty Jenkins would get if Wonder Woman 84 performed at the box office were then just paid out by Warner Brothers to keep their talent happy. Smart thing to do, but when you have to do it for 17 movies, very, very expensive, especially when you're AT&T and you're $150 million in debt anyway. $150 billion in debt. The Denis Villeneuve essay in Variety was brutal, but he is attacking the wrong party. It was Toby Emmerich and Carolyn Blackwood of Warner Brothers who came up with this streaming plan and brought it to AT&T. Toby thought that if Warner Brothers movies, Toby Emmerich and Carolyn Blackwood are executives at Warner Brothers. Toby is runs a studio. And what he wants to do is solidify his position in a changing world. And that changing world, the studios, man, the way the studios have been working, no. Where you want to go is you want to run a streaming service. Therein is the new power in Hollywood. Make no mistake, the streamers are where it is at. All of the power is going to be consolidated there. And with a deeply, deeply compromised theatrical release, the whole marketplace, movie theaters compromised. If you're Captain Dunzel, like in the Star Trek episode, The Ultimate Computer, if theaters don't come back, if you don't solidify a place with your streaming service, if you're one of those executives, you're out. You're out of the family, Tom. Toby thought that if Warner Brothers movies drove more subscriptions than HBO content, they might put him in charge instead of Casey Bloys, who currently outranks him in the streaming content hierarchy. Toby decided that the risk of torching filmmaker relationships was worth the prospects of rising higher in the corporate ranks by looking like the savior of HBO Max. That seems pretty reasonable to me. Of course, it's not show friends, it's show business. And at the end of the day, you got to look out for number one. You have to do that. And Toby Emmerich's he's a very smart guy. He's not stupid. And he saw the writing on the wall. And he's like, I got to keep my position in Hollywood, because the one thing about the people that are over here, I can guarantee and tell you, they're always scared that one wrong decision will torpedo their entire career. Creative people never think that way. I mean, maybe they might if they got a giant movie coming out, but for the most part, creative people have 100,000 things in their heads they want to do anyway. So, and most creative people know that they will continue to create. But the people over here, if they spectacularly flame out, where do you go? Where do you wind up? I know Hollywood's a place where executives there's more phoenixes rising from the ashes and on the executive side of Hollywood than even in all the mythologies of the world put together. It's amazing. Toby decided that the risk of torching filmmaker relationships was worth the prospects of rising higher in the corporate ranks by looking like the savior of HBO Max. I'm sure Denis Villeneuve will eventually find out, and he's going to feel even more betrayed. As for the contract model, I doubt they would adopt something similar to phone services. The closest thing to a long-term contract a streamer will do is give some sort of discount to prepay for a full year or longer. They would lose too much money on the customers who will just join to churn, which is sign up, watch the content they wanted to see, then cancel. There is still money to be made there. You know what? That's why I like to write this person, because it never occurred to me that people who churn, meaning I'm just going to have Disney Plus while I watch The Mandalorian, that there's a lot of money to be made off of that. I would have thought that, that might have been something that they didn't want, but those aren't everybody. Most people just sign up and they get their subscriptions, and churners are a nice chunk of change. So that's sort of interesting. That's why I always write this person. They always have great insight. So what we saw happen yesterday, the letter that he was referring to, for those of you who might not have been watching the John Campea show, Denis Villeneuve, who is right now finishing up Dune. Dune's been pushed a year. Now, as we know from what happened with Legendary, I covered this on the show the other day, the wackiness with Tenet and Dune, and Legendary wasn't playing ball with Warner Brothers, so Warner Brothers wasn't playing ball with Legendary. There was some wackiness and hurt feelings there. But Denis Villeneuve, bucking the idea that never bite the hand that feeds you, wrote what I thought was one of the greatest essays in Daily Variety that I've ever read from any creative. And let me share it with you, and we will get stronger from the sharing. He wrote this: Dune director Denis Villeneuve blasts HBO Max deal exclusive. This was yesterday at 5 o'clock at night. And this is Denis Villeneuve, his own words. I learned in the news that Warner Brothers has decided to release Dune on HBO Max at the same time as our theatrical release, using prominent images from our movie to promote their streaming service. This is the director of the movie, who's still working on the movie, had no idea this was coming down the pike. Here's a man that has been working his entire life to make movies, and he thinks that he's working on a giant big screen experience, an adaptation of one of the greatest science fiction novels ever written, for an audience that's going to gather and watch this on a gigantic screen. That is what he is working for. That's what he was hired to do. He was laboring under that impression. And he learns from the news that Warner Brothers basically said, nope, we're going to go a different way. Sure, some people can see it in the theaters, but we're going to put it on TV first. I cannot tell you how disheartened he must have felt when he read this. I learned the news that Warner Brothers had decided to release Dune on HBO Max at the same time as our theatrical release, using prominent images from our movie to promote their streaming service. With this decision, AT&T has hijacked one of the most respectable and important studios in film history. There's absolutely no love for cinema, nor for the audience here. It is all about the survival of a telecom mammoth, one that is currently bearing an astronomical debt of more than $150 billion. Therefore, even though Dune is about cinema and audiences, AT&T is about its own survival on Wall Street. With HBO Max's launch a failure thus far, AT&T decided to sacrifice Warner Brothers' entire 2021 slate in a desperate attempt to grab the audience's attention. Warner Brothers' sudden reversal from being a legacy home for filmmakers to a new era of complete disregard draws a clear line for me. Filmmaking is a collaboration reliant on the mutual trust of teamwork, and Warner Brothers has declared they are no longer on the same team. As I've talked about on this show, it ain't show business, or it ain't show friends, it's show business, as Bob Sugar would say. But the thing is, everybody in this business relies on the relationships, the interpersonal relationships they have with other people. I mean, corporations are still run by other human beings. And when you're working for them and you're doing work underneath their umbrella, you have to be able to trust them. Otherwise, you can't do your work effectively. It's just the same thing I talk about filmmakers. When you have an incredibly talented group of people that you've brought together on your crew, the only way you can really fuck that up as a director is if you don't know what you're doing. When you step onto a set, if you want to win your crew, there are two things that have to happen on a set, and you have until the end of lunch to make those things happen on the first day. The first thing that has to happen is you as the director have to make sure that you know exactly what you want, what you are going to do. That means your first AD has to know, your cinematographer has to know. You have to stick to your plan. There is no faster way than to lose your crew than to prove to them you don't know what you're doing. Because once you've done that, they can't trust you anymore. And if they can't trust you, that means they don't know how their work day is going to go. If they don't know how their work day is going to go, that means they don't know how their work week is going to go, which means they don't know how their potentially entire job could go. If it's 16 weeks, 20 weeks, 24 weeks, however long it's going to go. And people don't like that. So it's the same thing. The director, in order to be that secure, has to know that his studio partners have his back, or her back, or their back. They have to know these things. And if you don't know that, it makes it very difficult to do your creative work. So there is an element of trust. And that's why so much of Hollywood, the business is built on relationships. People trust one another because so many people are out for themselves and will fuck you over. And if you don't know you can trust people, You can't do business in Hollywood. And what the studio did with this HBO Max deal is they told all of the creatives in this business, everyone, and they did it to, 17 crews, 17 directors, however many actors. I mean, that's what they did, because AT&T, those executives do not understand how Hollywood works. Because in the corporate world, you don't have to like somebody, to work with them, but in Hollywood you do, because especially on a set, you're with them all day long for months at a time, and you can't sit at a cubicle and not talk to somebody all day. It is a social business. So anyway, streaming services, Denis Villeneuve goes on, streaming services are a positive and powerful addition to the movie and TV ecosystems, but I want the audience to understand that streaming alone can't sustain the film industry as we know it before COVID. Streaming can produce great content, but not movies of Dune's scope and scale. Warner Brothers' decision means Dune won't have the chance to perform financially in order to be viable, and piracy will ultimately triumph. He's probably right about that. Once you put something on broadcast television, somebody can copy it. And if somebody can copy it, it means they can put it up online immediately. And those are very real concerns. And once you've done that, your movie is not nearly as valuable as it is that the only place you can see it is in a movie theater, at least for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months. Warner Brothers might just have killed the Dune franchise. This is one for the fans. AT&T's John Stankey, at this point, I think John Stankey is the most apropos. What a name for a guy that a lot of people don't like. John Stankey. He's changed the whole meaning of the term, let's put a little bit of stank on it. Said that the streaming horse has left the barn. In truth, the horse left the barn for the slaughterhouse. Public safety comes first. Nobody argues with that, which is why when it became apparent the winter would bring a second wave of the pandemic, I understood and supported the decision to delay Dune's opening by almost a year. The plan was that Dune would open in theaters in October of 2021 when vaccinations will be advanced and hopefully the virus behind us. Science tells us that everything should be back to normal next fall. Dune is by far the best movie I've ever made. My team and I devoted more than 3 years of our lives to make it a unique big screen experience. Our movie's image and sound were meticulously designed to be seen in theaters. I'm speaking on my own behalf, though I stand in solidarity with the 16 other filmmakers who now face the same fate. Please know I am with you and that together we are strong. The artists are the ones who create movies and series. I strongly believe the future of cinema will be on the big screen, no matter what any Wall Street dilettante says. Since the dawn of time, humans have deeply needed communal storytelling experiences. Cinema on the big screen is more than a business. It's an art form that brings people together, celebrating humanity, enhancing our empathy for one another. It's one of the very last artistic, in-person collective experiences we share as human beings. Once the pandemic is over, theaters will again be filled with film lovers. This is my strong belief, not because the movie industry needs it, but because we humans need cinema as a collective experience. See, all that's great, Denis, and I love what you said, but that is not a business-minded approach. I think you might be correct, but there's not really any evidence to support that. As a matter of fact, I would say, and I am a lifelong cinema lover, I think there's probably evidence to support the exact opposite. Believe me, I do not want to see your Dune on TV. I want to see it in a giant IMAX theater. But I don't think that we, sir, respectfully, are the majority of the human race. So just as I have both a fiduciary and a creative responsibility to fulfill as the filmmaker, I call on AT&T to act swiftly with the same responsibility, respect and regard, responsibility, respect, and regard to protect this vital cultural medium. The economic impact to stakeholders is only one aspect of corporate social responsibility. Finding ways to enhance culture is another. The movie-going experience is like no other. In those darkened theaters, films capture our history, educate us, fuel our imaginations, and lift and inspire our collective spirit. It is our legacy. Long live theatrical cinema. Denis Villeneuve. Look, I agree with everything he said there. Unfortunately, that's just not the way that the future is going to go. And I'll say it right now. Movie theaters are, the way we know them now, are doomed. Eventually, they're doomed. And I'm telling you, the direct-to-consumer model is where it's at. And that's what the studios are going to want. Disney has understood this. And Disney proved yesterday that Disney, all they do, their entire brand, the Disney brand, says one thing to people. And that one thing is, like Maximus asked before he got to Rome, are you not entertained? Disney, all they want to do is provide families, people around the world of all ages, of all walks of life, of all shapes, size, colors, and creeds. Disney's experience is to carefully curate the widest reaching entertainment experience for everyone while making the most amount of money. And they're one of the most effective companies to do that. And the fact that they're giving the fan base what they gave us yesterday, if I, as a middle-aged man with one foot in his grave, can get excited. And by the way, I don't have a cynical bone at first. When I see something, hey, if you're making this, I am all in until I see it. I will get excited about something. I get excited about every James Bond movie, even though James Bond movies, they've done me right about 50% of the time. I still love James Bond. I go wholeheartedly into every James Bond movie like a dog about to go for a walk. I can't wait. And I do that with everything. Star Wars, Star Trek, MCU, every movie. I feel that way. And I go in and I let if the work lets me down, it lets me down. But I mean, Disney is a company that yesterday I was filled with joy. Hey, an alien TV show. I don't know why it's going to be set on Earth, but okay. Remaking, doing a new version of Shogun, one of my favorite things that's ever been on TV. All right. How many Marvel shows and movies did we get announced yesterday? They're bringing The Abomination back from the Universal Hulk movie with Tim Roth. Really? How cool is that? Wow. Everything they said, let's do some kind of a dark thriller show, Acolyte, set in the Star Wars universe, made by the person who made Russian Doll. Fuck yeah, bring it on. Like, they are giving me a whole reason to get excited and take my money. You want me to subscribe to Disney Plus 3 years in advance? Done. Take the cash. I'll do it. Because what are they giving me? An entertainment experience that I can trust. Their Star Wars movies notwithstanding, I still got excited for them, and I went to all of them. But you know what? Today's episode of The Mandalorian, come on, man. I mean, Henri Clouseau's Wages of Fear and William Friedkin's Sorcerer, name checked. Those transport trucks look like my old Big Track toy, if you ever had that. I mean, what's not to love? You got Bill Burr giving the Empire more pathos and humanity than any other time in the entire history of the Star Wars saga, finding out how they do business and finding out that somebody who's an Imperial officer can hold a grudge. And not only that, they gave us one of the great douchebag Imperial officers we've ever seen. I love that actor. I love that guy. It's too bad he's not going to stick around. But, I mean, that's what Disney's giving us. And I think that they know what they're doing. And they're employing an incredibly wide array of creators to do what they're doing. And from the outside looking in, as a film fan, as a television fan, as a science fiction fan, as a Star Wars fan, as an MCU fan, everything that Disney told us about yesterday excited me. Yeah, am I going to be deeply cynical about the garbage movies I thought that By the way, of the 3 Star Wars movies that came out in the Disney sequel era of the Skywalker saga, The Last Jedi is the best of the movies. As movies. Might not be the best Star Wars for you, but as a movie, I think The Last Jedi was the best of them. I really do. It might not have been what you wanted, but as a film, I really do think it was the best film. Do I think they should have gone to Canto Bight in the middle of the movie? No. I think the movie should have opened in Canto Bight, and it should have been a pre-title sequence. I mean, movies don't have that, but after you see the word Star Wars, you could open at Canto Bight. You're in the middle of the intrigue. You're in the middle of some caper, and start the movie there with Rose Tico and Finn. Go. And then they have to get back. But whatever, that's neither here nor there. But I just see that what we have going on here is a massive disruption that was going to happen anyway. And the real question is, at the end of the day, the thing that I think is most exciting is that all of these people over here, however their businesses are all disrupted, whether they're the agents are not fighting for their clients, the agents are fighting for themselves, like everybody else is. Over here, you know what the people over here, you know what the creatives are going to get? They're finally going to get a real partnership with people that are going to say, look, we want you to make this for this amount of money, and for doing so, you get paid this. Here's the check. Go make your movie. They don't have to deal with any other bullshit. You don't even have to have red carpets. You don't even have to have, like, press junkets anymore. They pay you. You get to make what you want to make. You deliver it. And if you do your job, then they say, wow, our audience love this. Come back, Scott Frank. Godless was awesome. What do you want to do now? Well, I want to partner up with a producer who's been trying to make this Walter Tevis novel for 30 years about a girl playing chess. A girl playing chess? Really? Yes. Well, Godless did okay. And you say this guy who wrote the book about the girl doing chess wrote The Color of Money and The Hustler, and he wrote a science fiction novel called Mockingbird that should get made but hasn't been made yet. Yeah, that guy. Well, Scott, if that's what you want to do for us, you made one that was pretty good. Here's a check. Go make your movie, or here's your money. And then Scott Frank comes back with his movie or his miniseries, his 7-part miniseries about a girl who plays chess, and it becomes the most watched thing on Netflix for a while. What, like 80 million people have watched it? Netflix is like, that's dope. Hey, Scott, what do you want to make next? You want to go for the trifecta? You want to make another 7-part miniseries for us? Do you want to make it about basket weavers in Outer Mongolia? Because we'll give you the money. That's what creative people want. That's what the streaming services are going to give to the creative people. They're going to give them money, assuming the creative people succeed. They're going to give them money and no bullshit. Yes, Dave Chappelle, here's a lot of money. Go make your shows. Well, Netflix, how well did my shows do as you smoke the cigarettes? Dave, your shows are some of our biggest shows we've ever done. Certainly the biggest stand-up comedy specials of all time. Here's another $50 million. Can you go make us a few more shows? Yes, Netflix, I can. By the way, Netflix, I don't like you playing the Chappelle Show. I don't get paid for it. The people that made that show, they lied to me. They made me sign bad contracts. What are you going to do? Would you please take that off your streaming service for me? Yes, sir, Mr. Chappelle. We will. Now go make your great shows. That's what all the people over here are frightened of. The people over here, the good creatives, they don't need any of these people anymore. The studio executives, the managers, all these people, this whole ecosystem that is reliant upon these people over here, you don't need them. What do you need them for? I mean, I guess you kind of do, because people still have to make phone calls and set up lunches. You still have to get to the people over at Netflix. But the thing is, the Netflix people are direct. When they give you the green light, or Disney Plus, yes. I mean, look what happened yesterday at the Disney earnings meeting. They just said, here's the creative teams for all of these shows. Here's who we're working with. Yes, I bet you didn't think you'd see this character show up over here. You didn't think our little character was going to be in this movie, but she is. And they make these decisions. The creative people know where they are. They go make their thing, and they lead their lives. And what we're going to watch is an internecine battle that you've never seen before. My God. It's going to be great watching Hollywood tear itself apart. I can't wait. I can't wait to see where it winds up. You know, it's going to be very, very interesting. And I don't know who's going to be left standing. But you know what? When you have Denis Villeneuve being able to write letters like this about the very studio that's financing the movie that he's working on right now for them, you know the world has changed. And unless anybody's paying attention, because at the end of the day, look, AT&T's got their debt, they've got their infrastructure. Movies are not what they were interested in. Movies were a means to an end. They want all this stuff to be transmitted over their own systems, and you know, I just see it. It's going to be a win for creatives. I see it that way. There's going to be a lot of opportunity because these streaming services have a voracious appetite for new content. And if Disney is truly going to start spending $14 billion to $16 billion a year, that's a lot of money. And even if they spend $12 billion of that on MCU and Star Wars movies, there's still $2 billion lying around to make, hey, I've got a great $4 million science fiction movie I want to make for you. It'd be perfect for Disney Plus. So there's a lot of opportunity. Anyway, I'm excited. I can't wait to see what happens. But it's interesting watching the business tear itself apart. I mean, they're going to tear itself apart over the guise of protecting the sanctity of going to the movies and the sanctity of their creators. But all the people that are bitching and moaning and complaining, they're worried about their own position in the world. And their own position is becoming increasingly more irrelevant. Because if you're a creative, wouldn't you want to go directly to the source? You turn on the movie spigot, the movie money spigot, you go make your movie and you deliver it. No muss, no fuss. And that's all you need. I mean, sure, you might have to have a lawyer. There's probably not even much negotiation going on. You know, with Netflix, they're like, we'll pay you this. Okay, good, go make your movie. I mean, it's not that simple, I know. But it's simpler than it was with this stuff going on. And it'll get simpler still. But you got to be good. You got to be good. You still have to be at the top, 1% of the echelon of people that are going to make this stuff. I can't wait to see what happens. Anyway, all I know is that there's a lot of MCU, there's a lot of Star Wars, there's a lot of stuff that's and whatever Scott Frank does decide to make after the Queen's Gambit, I can't wait. That said, let's start out with seeing where everybody else is. Where are all you? Let's see. Let's find out. What do you think? Who's first? Let's go back and find out. I don't know. As is always the case. Oh, there's people before Willow. Of course, many people might not have paid attention, but we dropped the fifth episode, but the fourth regular episode of Let's Get Physical Media on the channel today. Dieter Bastian and I, Dieter all the way from Saarbrücken, Deutschland, did our fourth show. We've already recorded our fifth show, which I will also be dropping this weekend, and we will record our sixth show about what we got this week. So people like the show, check it out, subscribe, like. It always helps us out. Oh, wow. Very generous Martino from outer space. Send in an incredibly generous tip. Thank you, Martino. Martino says, we were about to land on Earth when we saw a Tesla floating toward the moon. Man, that must have been a hell of a car accident. Martino, you made my day with that kind of a tip and telling us a fun joke. Yes, listen, if you want to come down to Earth, I would love to meet you guys. I've always wanted to. I'm running a film festival right now, the first Intergalactic Imagination Connoisseurs Film Festival. I wish I'm going to get more people. I'm going to spend the rest of December trying to get more people to watch these wonderful films. They just keep getting more and more and more wonderful. And it is open to any extraterrestrials. So, Martino, why don't you come back to Earth? Don't let the Roadster, don't let it bother you. You should come down to Earth and enter a film in the film festival. And if not, why not be a judge? I would love to have an extraterrestrial judge, but I want to thank you so very much for supporting the channel. I don't know what we do to deserve it, but I will I will make sure that that money is put toward maybe a trophy for one of the filmmakers. Thank you so much. Real Galactic Federation sends in a tip and said, is Star Trek becoming real? Did you see former Israeli space security chief saying a Galactic Federation exists, and they've been waiting for humans to reach a stage where we will understand what space and spaceships are? Probably not true, but cool prospect. Hey, man, if that's true, count me in. If I can go be a liaison to the Galactic Federation and go into space forever, I will go. Please have me. Yes, I go whenever you want. Golden Brem sends in a super chat. I'll take Dieter's DVDs. I'm even willing to pay a bit. Listen, I will not let you take my friend Dieter's physical media collection off his hands for nothing less than a pretty penny. I'm sorry. You're going to pay through the nose, and you're going to like it. Greetings from the regional Verband Saarbrücken, Deutschland, to both of you. Love the show. Are you really from Saarbrücken, Deutschland? well, Dieter and I both say hello, and thanks for supporting the channel. Brian Garrigan subscribed to the channel, and Gus Sotelo subscribed to the channel. Thank you, gents. Throg Carbone motherfucker sends in a tip and says, "What's up, Go Girl lovers? Please tell me you noticed ScarJo's Black Widow in the Loki trailer. She was there, fellow nerds. I kind of feel like we're being punked by Parakurt's Trek, and some dumbass is going to jump out from an inconspicuous van in your yard. I don't know, it all looked good to me. I just love the people that have no problem with the Guardian of Forever becoming an ambulatory Captain Brass from the CSI series. I don't know. That could happen. Sure. I thought the Guardian was, built to portray the past in this manner. But, hey, let's go back to the original Ellison. Why not? Dundley has subscribed to the channel. Thank you for that. Mr. Tickletrunk is here. Send in a super chat. Thank you, Mr. Tickletrunk. And Willow, of course, is here. Willow says, this is kind of a random question. Willow, I love your questions lately. This is kind of a random question, and hopefully not too inappropriate, but what is the best made adult film that you've ever seen? I haven't seen The Devil and Miss Jones yet, but I know the film has received praise from critics like Roger Ebert. That's actually a really interesting question. The best made, now that I'm thinking about it. See, what's interesting is that the approach to, you know what? I have somebody that I'm going to call. I am live. I'm going to call an expert on this subject, and I wonder if they'll take my call. I'm going to find out, and maybe they will. I'm going to call them, and this person is actually an expert. And I'm going to see what they have to say, because I think this is a really interesting question. The person I'm calling is an AVN winner, if they answer their phone. We'll see. They might not answer the phone. They could be busy.
Hey.
Hello, sir.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm actually live on my YouTube show.
Oh, well, hello.
Which means you're live on my YouTube show, and one of the cornerstone members of the Post-Geek Singularity is a lovely woman named Willow Yang, and she asks a question, and I started to think about it, and I was like, because I was gonna maybe even use one of some of your work as an example, but if I might, could I ask you her question?
Absolutely.
The question is. This is kind of a random question and hopefully not too inappropriate. But what is the best made adult film? By the way, I have not used your name, so nobody knows who you are. What is the best?
Let's say that I am Eli Cross.
Yes, this is, ladies and gentlemen, this is director Eli Cross, who has made some of what I would say to be some of the hottest adult movies I've ever seen. So she says, what is the best made adult film that you've ever seen? I haven't seen The Devil and Miss Jones yet, but I know the film has received praise from critics like Roger Ebert. And I figured since you are one of the deftest directors of adult material I've ever seen, I figured you also have a historical knowledge of the genre. I figured you might be a better person to answer this question than I would be.
It's a hard question to ask because, of course, like everything else and like all other genres, it's subjective. And without knowing a person's personal preferences, I don't think I could actually answer that. Devil and Miss Jones is very well made.
Do you think it's dated, though? I mean, obviously, it was one of the cornerstones of 70s breakthrough.
Sure.
It's also a very dark movie.
It's a great movie. Even in its day, even by 70s standards, it wasn't. And I'm Georgina Spelden, who starred in Devil and Miss Jones, is a friend of mine. I did an interview with her that someday I want to actually cut together the hour-long version of the interview because she is amazingly sharp, funny, bright, intelligent. She's a person you could just sit and listen to talk and tell stories forever. She's an amazing woman. But everybody kind of understood that even for its day, Devil and Miss Jones was not a particularly good adult movie. It was not intended to be. It was intended to basically be an art film with sex scenes.
Right.
And so, in that regard, it actually stands up very well. All 70s movies, by modern standards, the sex scenes are very odd and dated. They last about 2 or 3 minutes. You can't see anything, It really now resembles modern porn in no way, shape, or form. Now, most modern porn is, strictly speaking, resolutely terrible. It's become incredibly corporate, and there is virtually no creativity left in porn, except for companies like Lust Cinema, still allows their directors to do things, but literally everyone else is working for a corporation in Canada making exactly the same cookie-cutter porn. But Devil and Miss Jones is not a bad candidate for one of the best made. Misty Beethoven, Opening of Misty Beethoven, is also a very well-made adult film.
No, that's Henry Paris, right?
Yeah.
Henry Paris is my boy.
Yeah.
Radley Metzger, who became Henry Paris.
Yes. And Radley Metzger was many things. A nice person was not one of them. But he was many things, and he was actually an excellent filmmaker. And Opening of Misty Beethoven is really his best work. It's well acted, it's well written. It's one of the only adult films that I will still quote dialogue from, which that just doesn't happen.
And by the way, I should mention that you've actually won a Best Screenplay award at the AVN Awards.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I think I won like 7.
Yes, but we are talking to probably the greatest writer in modern porn. I'm speaking to them right now.
I don't know if that's true, and even if it is, I don't know if that's actually an accolade or something to be embarrassed of. But
200 Watt Studio says, he says, tell Eli Captain Marvel XXX is great.
It might be. I had nothing to do with it. So
I just thought that's what he said.
I have not worked with Axel Braun in any capacity since like 2017.
But you and I worked together for Axel Braun. You cast me.
We did. He wasn't there. He wasn't on set.
No.
But we did. Because the big dirty secret is that Axel only barely directed his movies and often did them, from a distance or his house.
Yes, I mean we should say that I played Biggs Darklighter in Star Wars XXX.
Did.
See, I don't have a porn cock, so I couldn't do any. I have to be a background character, but I got to act.
I believe you were actually because the original footage hadn't been released yet. I think you were actually the first on-screen portrayal of Biggs that actually had significant dialogue. I think you have more dialogue than he had in the real release of Star Wars.
It's true. And I got to die in the battle over the Death Star in the cockpit of an X-Wing fighter.
You got to die in battle. Yeah. That stuff, now that stuff is all owned by a Canadian company.
Well, listen, I have to continue on with this live show, but according to the chat here, this is Willow's question is the question of the day. This might be one of the greatest moments I've ever had on this show, so I want to thank you for picking up your phone.
Absolutely, no problem. Yeah, I am on set shooting units of pornography today.
Really?
Yes. I just finished shooting a girl scene.
Nice. Well,
but thank you very much for calling, and hello to everyone, and you have a great show.
All right, have a great rest of your shoot.
It is a fantastic podcast.
Break a leg.
Take care.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was director Eli Cross to answer Willow Yang's. Come on, what other YouTube channel can give you this? Josh Rosaukis became a member. Josh Rosaukis, I hope you're feeling better. Hope all is well with you. I know you're probably still recovering from your surgery and all that, but stay safe. And, you had sent me a message. Josh asked about asked for my help that I'm still looking into about computer stuff, which we'll talk about later. Ludger, long last name, has subscribed to the channel. Thanks, Ludger. Jeff Yerke is here. He says, hey, Rob, your honest opinion. With pressure mounting from above-the-line talent, creative agencies, and the unions, do you think AT&T and HBO Max will back down off the Warner Brothers day-and-date policy? Live long and prosper. Mr. and Mrs. Yerkman, you know what? To be honest, I think what's going to happen with Wonder Woman 84 is going to be a very telltale sign. Look, Warner Brothers is trying. Look, nobody wants to lose money. Everybody's trying to figure out a way to make their cash back. Doesn't matter who it is. Warner Brothers is sitting on a bunch of films. People are racking up interest charges. They got to make their money back. COVID is running rampant. The United States, it looks like moviegoing is a wash for the immediate future. Maybe a vaccine will help, but it isn't going to come back anytime soon. However, if Wonder Woman 84 makes a ton of money foreign, maybe it could work. And if Wonder Woman drives massive subscriptions to HBO Max, you don't know. Again, this is evolving. And as John is fond of saying, everybody loves a winner. Everybody loves a winner. So we shall see what will happen with that. I think it's going to be very interesting. I do think if this strategy with Marvel, for shame, if this strategy does not work with Wonder Woman 84 and it crashes and burns, I think cooler heads might prevail. Or not. I mean, we'll see. But I think it's really going to be up to what happens with Wonder Woman 84. Marcy G3121 has subscribed to the channel. Thank you, Marcy. Appreciate that. Bob Kowal. Again, I love it when Bob Kowal is here. He couldn't be here for a while because, man, if you haven't gone to his Facebook page and looked up his pictures about what he does to his house for Halloween, his infestation event. I mean, if there's no COVID next year, I would be willing. I think I should take a trip to Bob Kowal's house if he'll have me. Don't worry, Bob. I won't stay there. I'll stay at a hotel. But I would love to come do a whole broadcast. I'd like to take this show on the road and come hang out and do like a live broadcast day and night and see everybody coming by and show people what you've done because it's amazing. Bob says, do you think public documentation of streaming traffic on titles will become a necessity or even a regulation? It seems traffic needs to be made known to assess value and facilitate new compensation models. Now, that's a really good question. See, here's the thing. Once, and again, it ain't show friends, it's show business. Here's why this is going to be sticky. But I think you're right. I think it's going to have to happen. So if you're Scott Frank and you made Godless, which is a great 7-part Western miniseries for Netflix, and it does, reasonably well, Netflix is like, all right, Scott, let's say, we gave you $10 million or this is, I don't know how much it costs, but let's say for the sake of argument, we give you $10 million. It did well. And so for, the Queen's Gambit, we'll give you 20. And same amount of episodes. We've doubled your money. You get to go make most of the show in Germany. The Queen's Gambit was mostly shot in Germany. And it comes back. Well, if the Queen's Gambit then becomes your most successful streaming show, then like with everything else, Scott Frank's like, well, I got $10 million for Godless and I got $20 million for the Queen's Gambit, but since now I've made 2 shows for you and Queen's Gambit resulted in this many subscribers and this many people watched it, if 100 million of your subscriber base watch a show that you've particularly made and everyone else's shows don't get that many views, that means you are more valuable to that streaming service than they are. And it ain't show friends, it's show business. Show me the money. Show me the money. That's when you need Bob Sugar to come in. And that's, of course, why you need lawyers and why you need agents and why that's not all going to go away. It's just going to change. same as it ever was. But then it's going to go, and then Netflix will become more and more like studios and all of that. But until that happens, but yes, I think we're going to have that, because I mean, if the studios, I mean, really what they should say, and if the streamers were, say, to band together and say, look, we're going to offer you this much money. Again, then you go back to the guilds, the various guilds, the DGA, the WGA, IATSE. They protect their members from abuse. They make sure people get paid what they're worth. And that's why they exist. That's why the agencies exist, to make sure their clients are paid. That's why managers exist, to make sure their clients are taken care of. So this whole ecosystem is not going to go away anywhere. It's just that the difference is it's the talent that I think will drive those things more than they have in the past, because the streamers need the talent less than they need. The streamers need the talent more than they need relationships, because now there's all these gatekeepers that can keep them away from the talent. But if Dave Chappelle can call up the head of Netflix and ask him, please take the Chappelle Show off the air, then they've got a direct conduit. You don't have to have agents. You have to play the phone game. You know, in Hollywood, I kid you not. So you might want to talk. Somebody calls you and you don't really want to talk to them, but you know what you'll do is, in order to keep up appearances, you'll call them, say, at 7:00 when they've probably left their office. That way you've dropped in the call, but you've dropped in the call at a time when you know they're not going to be there. There's that kind of shenanigan game-playing BS that happens all the time, and it's so frustrating. So maybe that kind of stuff will go away, but you never know. Stephen Scott Bonnick subscribed to this channel. Thank you, Stephen. Journey's End became a member. Well, thank you, Journey's End. That was the episode where Wesley Crusher joins the Traveler. Zeed Tempest sends in a tip and says, what if you got just about every fan together, mostly from the action, horror, and sci-fi community, and made a company that would basically publish movies themselves without interference? Following tips from True Indie by Don Coscarelli. I love Don Coscarelli, and I love his wife, Shelley. I mean, Don Coscarelli's last name has the word scare in it. Don Coscarelli. And Phantasm's one of my favorite horror movies. And Don was, he's always been a supporter, and so is his wife, and I consider them very friendly. And I love them. And Don Coscarelli has called his own shots. But even he was totally boned over Beastmaster. But he's held on to the Phantasm franchise. And I think here's the problem. The problem is, and what I see for indie creators like myself, and what John Campea did. For those of you who don't know, a movie I helped John Campea produce, Movie Trailers, A Love Story, is now available on all streaming platforms. Now, that movie didn't cost very much, and John paid for it out of his own pockets. I mean, basically, it was super chats and tips, and what he makes, he put that money back into making a movie. And it's come out. One of the things that exist are these methods of distribution, like YouTube, like Vimeo, like Amazon, where you can distribute your own work. Now, the thing about that is, when you have a fan base, it's great. Like I have my subscriber count is, I think I have 30. Well, I can tell you. Would you like to know how many subscribers I have on YouTube? Let's see. As of right now, let's find out. This channel has 31,339 subscribers. Now, that's pretty good for my little channel. It's pretty good. Other people I know, whether people like Midnight's Edge or John Campea, they have, say, 250,000 subscribers. Now, when you get up to that level, if you had, say, 250,000 subscribers, or channels that have over millions of subscribers, most of those channels are making money off ad revenue and whatever they do, and they're making a fine living. And they're doing creative stuff. If I had that kind of a fan base, I would do exactly what you and Zeed Tempest. I want to do that, and I'll tell you, to be honest, the short story competition, which is going to go live next week. Part of my goal from the short story competition that I'm running here on this channel, as I said, I'm going to pick not just me, but I'm probably going to throw it out to you guys. I'm going to pick like 5 short stories that I think will make the best the movies that we're actually going to make. So for the short story for those of you who don't know, this channel, when the film festival is over, we're having a short story competition. And the short story competition, the stories are going to be for an anthology called The Imagination Connoisseurs. That's what the anthology is going to be called. And I'm going to publish stories that are all written by you. And the stories are to be between 5,000 and 10,000 words. And the premise of the story is the title of the book, The Imagination Connoisseurs. I just made that phrase up. I don't quite know what it means. It means different things to different people. It means different things to me on different days. But I wanted to throw it out to you. People like calling themselves members, that they're part of the Post-Geek Singularity. I figured that would be the fun part, is to have these funny little titles. It's like when I would make up my DVD or my special features titles. I always wanted highfalutin titles like Requiem for Krypton, Making Superman Returns. I like those kinds of things, and it's fun. Like an imagination connoisseur, that's what you are. You're members of the Post-Geek Singularity. But what is an imagination connoisseur? So the short story competition, they are stories. I didn't want essays. They are stories. And I figured the stories would be there to define not only what an imagination connoisseur what is the experience of being an imagination connoisseur? Maybe you can write a horror or science fiction story as a story that would appeal to imagination connoisseurs. I am not going to limit that. Whatever it means, it's going to be called The Imagination Connoisseurs, and we're also running a contest for to design the cover. Now, what I want to do is we're going to pick, it's not going to be necessarily the best story in the book, because the best story could be a story set in the far-flung reaches of outer space that we can't afford to make. But I'm going to pick one of the stories from this book, and I'm going to make it as a short film. I'm going to direct it, and I'm going to work with the original writer of the short story to write an adaptation of that story into screenplay form. And we're going to make it into a movie, hopefully in 2.5 months, in and out. We're going to do it very quickly. All things being equal, assuming, of course, we don't have to deal with COVID, but we're going to do it quickly. And I want to use that book, and I want to use that short story and see, okay, would you like to see a series based on this book? Did you like this short film? Because like you said, what we want to do is I would much rather turn this channel into not me spouting off, but I want to put my money where my mouth is. I would love to turn this channel into a channel where we create actual, not that this isn't content, but actual content that you would want to watch, whatever that is, whether it's a $1 million movie, and I want to make it, what would be my goal would be to make this, everybody watching this channel, you guys are the studio, you have the money. I have certain ideas that I want to do. Would you be willing to invest? You've got companies like Legion M that are raising money from fans. But what I want to do is make literally an interactive studio where you guys are my financiers, whether it's $1 a day or whatever, and we make something, and the entire process of it being made is documented on this channel, where you guys could even make decisions. We'd take polls and poll you on decisions. Maybe here's the 3 stories that I want to do. Actually, that's probably what I will do. I'll pick a number of stories, and it'll be up to you which one we make. Because part of the things that you do when you're supporting this channel is to help us pay for things like this. I mean, I want to get the books bound. I want them hardcover and slipcased and nice. Now, I will sell those books because I won't have enough money. I have to subsidize, maybe crowdfund the printing of those books. I don't know yet. We'll have to see how strong the material is that we get. But Zed Tempest, I want to do that, and I think you're absolutely right, because that's what this is all about. That's what this community is all about. And ultimately, wouldn't it be fun to make stuff together? Like all of us? And if eventually, I mean, we'll see. There's a lot of talented filmmakers. I mean, I would love to be able to tap the filmmakers whose movies I think we all think are the best, and maybe have them give them a shot to direct the actual stories that you guys have written. No one's ever done anything like that before. That's my end game. That's what I want to see this channel become. And wouldn't that be fun? Wouldn't that be interesting? And at the end of the day, what if we made an anthology show that was like 8 shows, right? I don't even know what the budgets are going to be yet, but then if we could sell the physical media, if we could stream them, would you pay to see 5 short films for a certain amount of money? I don't know. It's all up in the air, but we'll see what happens. I've actually been pretty overwhelmed by the film festival entries, and a lot of them I've seen are really good, and even the ones that might lack something in technical prowess, there's a lot of really good ideas there as well. And I could see people, if they were given the right tools or they were given some personnel, they might be able to do some really good work. And I think that's what this channel, that's what I would like to see happen. I think it'd be really interesting. Calvin Bowles sends in a tip and says, why was Star Trek aired out of order on NBC, and why do they choose Mantrap as the first episode? Well, I think, to be honest, there's conflicting stories about that. I think probably maybe it came down to a network decision because they were so worried Star Trek was a thinking man show. They wanted to give it, let's give it a monster. Let's put a monster in the first. The first couple episodes of Star Trek are pretty, they're sort of easing you into it. I don't know why they didn't. I think Where No Man Has Gone Before is a great first episode. And I'm surprised they didn't air it that way, but I really don't know the answer, but I can find that out for you. Die150 and Christopher Cruz became subscribers. Calvin goes on to say, here's another City on the Edge of Forever question. Spock said, if Kirk did not let Edith die, millions of people in the future would die. But don't millions die by correcting it as well? Also, just because this is the timeline we are living in, how do we know what timeline is correct? Maybe we're living in an altered timeline, and maybe the one she became a leader was the correct one. We can never know. Well, Calvin, you've just stumbled upon the great time travel paradoxes that we have to grapple with every time we have a good time travel story. So what Calvin is referring to is the first time we ever see the Guardian of Forever in Star Trek. He was not ambulatory Captain Brass from CSI. The Guardian was a machine that was built by a long-dead ancient civilization designed to present time in one particular way. And the Guardian was at the whim of what other people wanted, not what it wanted. Although what it wanted was a question, and since before our sun burned hot in the sky, the Guardian was awaiting a question, as we know. That's a good question. Which timeline is the correct one? How do we know? We don't. But like you said, millions of people died in the timeline where Edith Keeler was killed because World War II happened. But downstream, how many hundreds of billions of people then got to live because of time unfurling the way it should? So, interesting question. You never know. Emil Johansson says, would you also be interested in seeing Lucas's plans for 7, 8, 9 laid out in a Marvel Comics series or a book? Yeah, because I've got that beautiful slipcase Dark Horse, the Star Wars book right over there. I love that kind of stuff. I think that'd be great. I'm sure that'll happen. Or maybe not, because Disney might not let it happen. Those things don't need to remake the canon, but I would love to know what his plans were, even if most people would hate it. I would too. I think it'd be great. 200 Watt Studio sends in a super chat and says, not as optimistic about Disney's Star Wars in the MCU. All prequels strip mining the saga. Their track record on Star Wars is awful. Mando and Rogue One are anomalies. Well, I'll tell you, I look at what happened with the Star Wars franchise up until now as it was a risk, and it was a risk that was being micromanaged from the corporate level on down. And I think now the obviously the Mandalorian, if nothing else, the Mandalorian might prove to be the single most successful Star Wars piece of media ever as the cornerstone of, because if you think about it, even at $6 a month, the 2 seasons of Mandalorian have, what are they at now? Past 85 million subscribers? Now think about that. We keep that going on a monthly basis. If you want to chalk a lot of that up to the Mandalorian over 2 years, that's a lot of money. So I would say that the pressure as far as having Star Wars succeed is off. The movies are done. Now let's get to the business of making real interesting Star Wars. I think that's where they're at now. And Rogue One, gets better the more I see it, and Mandalorian is chugging right along. The last half of season 2, I think, is excellent. 200 Watt Studios sends in another super chat and says, Last Jedi, maybe not a good Star Wars movie, but a good movie. 100% disagree with you. You can't make that separation, Rob, just like separating Discovery from Star Trek. Yeah, but I think Discovery is bad Star Trek and it's bad storytelling. Whereas I don't think The Last Jedi is necessarily a bad movie. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in The Last Jedi. I think it feels the most like a movie of the three. But I mean, I know why people hate it. Gnome Sayan has subscribed to the channel. Thank you, Gnome. Hassan is here. Nolan and Villeneuve are overreacting. Tenet is unwatchable. Nolan should be happy it made almost 400. Shut up and enjoy millions. And Dune was going to flop anyway. Do you still plan to take live calls on the show? I just did. Yeah, I should do that. 200 Watt Studio sends in another super chat and says, Let's Get Physical is a great show. TR 4K is great. TR. What? I know I should know what that is. TR 4K. The Ring? No, why am I know it. It should be right on the tip of my tongue. The TR 4K, great. I don't know which one it is. Electron Star Collapse. I believe I have a letter to read from you. Electron Star Collapse sends in a super chat and says, How do you feel the odds of us ever getting Rendezvous with Rama now with the HBO Max debacle and the change in distribution methods in general? I think we're going to get... Well, look, it depends if literary sci-fi works. We've got the Foundation trilogy coming, and if the Foundation trilogy is a critical and public hit, if people love it and it turned out great, we're going to get a lot more classic sci-fi. I mean, Dune, Foundation, these are cornerstones of the great canon of science fiction work. So I think it really depends. I don't think HBO Max, to be honest, I was talking about this with John. I think the biggest problem that HBO Max had was calling it HBO. They should have called it something else. Give it its own identity. HBO Max, you're like, wait a minute, HBO Go. How many HBOs are there? And so HBO doesn't have its own identity. And I think that was the big problem with HBO Max. But I think it all depends. If things perform, we'll get more of them. If they don't, we won't. 200 Watt Studio says, tell Eli Captain Marvel XXX is great. 200 Watt Studio sends in a super chat and says, biggest Darklighter, Rob. Oh, don't I wish. Don't I wish. One of the great shortcomings of my life. Stubble McShave sends in a tip and says, Netflix has for a long time been the #1 streaming choice. After Disney's presentation, I'm not sure that I would pick Netflix in a year or two. If only I could afford one service. Do you think we'll soon come to a point where Netflix is not the first choice? Well, you know what the thing that Netflix has is the wild diversity of its programming and its international fare, whether it's something like Money Heist or Dark. I mean, what Netflix is going to wind up being is the streamer for the world. Disney is very much focused on Disney. You know, they've got a lot of good stuff. They got the Fox catalog, which they'll also exploit. But I think they're kind of different things. I think Netflix is doing something different than Disney is. Netflix might not have, say, it won't have the MCU, it won't have Star Wars, it won't have Pixar, but Netflix is building a diversity of programming. And when I say that, I mean different kinds of programming, whether it's cooking shows or house shows or things that are, and they're doing it better. They've got a bigger head start. I just think it's going to be different. So I don't know if it'll ever be not the first choice. I think Netflix offers, until I just can't see Disney Plus offering the diversity of choice that Netflix does, simply because it's not part of their business model. Nick Parrish says, so Rob, I'm glad Marvel stopped playing games and for once acted. The 2008 Incredible Hulk exists. When I saw Tim Roth's Abomination was going to be in She-Hulk, I thought I was going to faint. And I mean that in a good way. Do you approve of Tim Roth, Rob? Yes, sir, Nick. And by the way, I love him as an actor. Love him. And I love the fact that Marvel does not say that, let's have Thunderbolt Ross and the Abomination. We don't, I mean, poor Edward Norton, but I like the fact that they've dipped back into that well. Because that movie is not bad. Vampire Crow subscribed to the channel. Brian Sutter became a member. Thank you, Brian. Jason Webster became a member. Larry Haupt became a member. Thank you, guys. Max World Entertainment became a member. Trey, thank you. Keaton Toothman. Oh, Keaton Toothman. Boy, do I have something to share that Keaton Toothman made. Wait till you see that. That's going up, too, this weekend. Wow, by the way. Nicely done. Have you any feature films entered in the fest? Well, Keaton, it just so happens that I have. Unfortunately, it's not in competition because it has been around before, but there is a movie. I wonder, you might know the filmmakers about that. But yes, you will be seeing lots. Keaton Toothman's movie will be dropping as part of the festival this weekend. As a matter of fact, it's actually locked and loaded already. Wade Poitras sent in a super chat and said, now that Disney has 10 Star Wars series coming, I feel my beloved Star Trek is fading into cultural significance. Is fading. Well, it is. Is there a way to inject new life into Star Trek? Yes. You know how you know how you inject new life into Star Trek? You allow all kinds of different creators a crack at doing Star Trek shows. That's what you do. That's what you do. You find like a Dave Filoni and a Jon Favreau. You find filmmakers who know what they're doing. You know, who've worked and made good. Of course, they probably think they already have been doing that, but that's what I would do. I would open up. The problem is, I think that, you know, the studio itself, you have Lucasfilm, which is under Disney. Secret Hideout has been tasked by CBS by deals that were made a long time ago, well, relatively speaking. And Secret Hideout basically has iron-fisted control, and Bad Robot, too, over the feature films. They really control the franchise. The studio doesn't. The studio needs to usurp control of the franchise and allow multiple creators to be making different shows. That's what I would do. So you know the hero sends in a super chat and says, "Hi Rob, been with you since Movie Talk." Well, thank you. Here's the question. I wasn't actually on Movie Talk. I was on John's show, but John was on Movie Talk. But I know what you mean. I'm a student majoring in theater. I want to be in the film industry, but I don't know where to start. Oh, well, you know. That's the tough one. Look, I mean, I started out as an art department production assistant. If you're majoring in theater, there is stuff to be had. I mean, one of the things that I've discovered, the best advice I can give to anybody who wants to work in the entertainment business, especially in movies or television, is that work begets work. And if you're a theater major, I'm not saying if you're going to work in community theater or something, you're going to get to be in television, but I've worked with production designers that came out of theater, and they get to work on movies. They can build things, fabricate things, and you just never know. So what you need to do is you've got to start working on things, wherever they might be. Like even when you're first starting out, if you're majoring in theater, go work. If you're majoring, that means you're in school. See if you can go work for a local theater company, and work in a theater company, whether it's behind the scenes, whether it's running lights. You got to start meeting people, and you never know. The work begets work. And remember, when you start out, I think everybody has this idea that I'm going to go work for a startup for $100,000 a year. Well, not when you're in the arts. When you're in the arts, you just got to go be scrappy and maybe do volunteer work at a theater or whatever. But what you have to do is start working with other people. And then when you're working with other people and they like you, if they like you and they like working with you, when they get something, you'll get the phone call. Hey, man, I got this gig. I need a crew. Do you want to come crew for me? And then, yes, I would. And once you've done that enough, and once you've got experience and people know you and you know them, actually, it's not whether you know people, it's whether they know you. That's the real advice. And then it'll snowball from there. James Segru has subscribed to the channel. Thanks, James. Nick Paris says, so Rob, ever since Ant-Man in 2015, I believe that any comic can be turned into a good movie with the right film crew. I believe that. Now I'm second-guessing myself, though, because I've told you before, Rob, that one of my favorite comics is Savage Dragon. And I've also just started Lady Justice, which is about a blind, gun-toting vigilante who is guided by a supernatural spirit. So, Rob, do you believe anything could be made into a good live-action movie, or are there properties that make you say, no way? I think probably anything could be. It just requires the right approach. I mean, when I say, if you're going to throw like the Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers at me, I mean, maybe you could do that. Hey, they made Fritz the Cat into an animated film, but I do think that anything, I wouldn't put past any story. I don't like the idea that any story can't get made. With the right creative team and the right approach, I think anything could get made. It's just finding that right approach is really, really, really hard. Really hard. Stubble McShave says, this has been an extreme PR week for streaming services. Have you ever seen anyone fumble their PR as bad as Warner Brothers did, while Disney had a brilliant PR presentation all in 1 week? No, I mean, it's an incredible dichotomy. And you look over there, and what's amazing is, what was the real difference between the Disney presentation and what Warner Brothers did when they announced HBO Max was going to put all these movies? Warner Brothers trotted out the Disney trotted out the creative teams. They all stood there, Kathleen Kennedy, Kevin Feige. They all talked about who was going to be on their shows, for the most part, and how proud they were of the people that were making these things. You know, they didn't get up there. A lot of corporations might say, we're selling our brand. But you know what Disney's learned? That the people working on these shows are just as important as the brand. When they hear people talking online about The Mandalorian and that Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau's names are being floated as much as Cara Dune and Grogu, well, maybe not as much as Grogu, but they listen to that. And they know that the audience is paying attention too. The audiences are savvy. And that, I thought that Patty Jenkins promo for Rogue Squadron was brilliant. I thought it was great. They know. So anyway, yes. Stubble goes on to say, with Disney Plus increasing their subs with over 12 million in a month, do you think Disney Plus will cross 100 million subs by the end of the year? The investor presentation and the approach of the holidays will surely drive subscription numbers a bit. Well, speaking of driving numbers, let me get to this one. This happened as a result of yesterday's meeting. Let's see if I can find where we were. Disney stock, believe it or not, Disney stock explodes to a new high, rising 14% after Investor Day bonanza. This was published at 1 o'clock this afternoon. Updated with the closing price. Disney shares exploded Friday, rising almost 14% to finish at $175.72. Trading volume was about 9 times its normal level. The investor euphoria follows the company's long-anticipated Investor Day. The Thursday afternoon event stretched into the evening, featuring 4 hours of plugs for 100 new film and TV titles coming to Disney Plus, as well as projections for 230 million to 260 million Disney Plus subscribers by 2024. The stock had already been on a tear coming into the event, and Friday's upswing helped lead the Dow Jones Industrial Average to a fractional gain above 30,000 after it spent most of the day in red figures. The turnaround in the stock had been remarkable. It dipped below $80 in the bleakest moments of COVID-19's onset in early of 2020. Where the hell was I? While the pandemic has decimated theme parks, movie theaters, sports, and other revenue generators for Disney, it has accelerated the company's pivot to streaming. If the growth rate continues, Disney has a chance to catch Netflix, which reported 195 million global subscribers as of September 30th. Analysts expressed their admiration for Disney's feat of producing a sequel to the company's bravura Investor Day in April 2019, when it first persuaded Wall Street of its streaming ambition and strategic plan. The stock jumped 10% to a then record $130 after that event, when the pricing and plan for Disney Plus were revealed. I mean, that's amazing. And you know why that was amazing but unsurprising? Because Disney knows what they're doing. I mean, Disney has been in this business for so long, providing the direct-to-consumer experience. So, yeah, Let's see. So I think that's amazing. Amazing. So yeah, Stubble, I think I don't know if it's gonna get up past 100,000 subscribers, but I think once people start seeing, maybe after WandaVision starts up. Keaton Toothman sends in another super chat and says, uploading another film tonight that should count in competition. Okay, here's the thing. Here's the and a lot of people didn't get this, but one of the big rules of the festival was it had to be a universal premiere. It couldn't have been on YouTube. I mean, some people I pushed it because only like 16 people had watched, or 16 views were on their channel, but the whole point of the festival was to be new. You had to be a new film, and your feature was made a couple years ago, and I found it other places, or maybe another place. So that's why. It wasn't that you did anything wrong, and I'm still going to have your feature up to watch. It's just that it wasn't unique. But if you're uploading something, I just want you want it to compete, because I think you should. I think you're talented. I think that it just has to be a premiere. Mr. Tickle Trunk is back. Would you please have your friend on for an interview? It would be fascinating. Which friend? The one I had on the phone? Also, I'd like to nominate The Whore of the Rings, Blown in 60 Seconds, RoboCop, Behind Enemy Behinds, Fast and Curious, and finally in Diana Jones and the Temple of Doom. In Diana Jones. In Diana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Are those real? I would assume they are, yeah. Calvin Bowes is back. In the episode yesteryear, Spock said that Captain Christopher had no significant historical contribution. How do you know he did not directly influence? For example, a friend of Columbus could have given him the idea for his voyage and years before. That's true, but I think that as part of the historical record, I think that Captain Christopher had no significant cultural contribution, but he did give birth to his son, who went to, Saturn? But that's a good question. We would never know about it today, so maybe just him not coming back changes history, whether he was a kid or not. You're absolutely right. I mean, who knows how time travel really works? It's hard to say. So yeah. Let's see. What do we got here? I got a letter. From Doc Vader. Hello, Doc Vader. Hey, Rob, I hope you and our fellow imagination connoisseurs are doing awesome. When you mentioned the movie Stone Cold, I mentioned Stone Cold on the Critical Drinkers podcast I did with him. I stopped at what I was doing and looked for it. I'm a sucker for 80s and 90s action flicks, and this intrigued me. I watched it without reading anything about it. Good for you. And I was quite entertained. That's the way to do it. I love that you did that. If you can get past his hair, then you can get past anything Brian Bosworth does in the movie, or should we just call him John Stone? Blackmailed by the good people from the Bureau, he goes undercover as a prospect in a biker gang. Although he's after the whole gang, he sets his sights to take down its leader, Chains Cooper, brilliantly played by Lance Henriksen, in which his performance was borderline either over the top or just pure frickin' awesome. I would say both. As a rule, there should be one doubting biker in this, and this is where Ice comes in, also brilliantly played by tough guy William Forsythe. The story is straightforward. Infiltrate and go undercover, gather evidence, and produce a witness to eventually put the gang behind bars with the Capitol's backing. The reckless John Stone does try to be smooth and in control, but as this is a 90s action movie, shit happens. Some random thoughts. The grub he made for his monitor lizard may be quite tasty without the eggshells. For a biker gang, I thought it was hilarious to see a meeting set in a fully working boardroom where AV equipment is set up along with a bulletin corkboard, overhead projectors, phones, a fax machine, and a copier. This comes to show that Chains may be highly organized and comes from a business or finance background. I thought so too. Chains Cooper's garage or man cave was spotlessly clean. It looked like a man's museum, well lit with some books and a vinyl collection, and the motorcycle on display like in a dealer's showroom. It speaks to the character. The details of the biker gang insignia and the attire were amazing. As per Chains, colors, man. Overall, I thought it was a great flick filled with satisfactory action scenes with middling violence and some nudity. It was also an excellent debut from Bosworth. The cheesy lines were delivered flawlessly, and you can see the change of tone and emotion when a scene calls for it. His performance was on par like Dolph Lundgren's, in which coincidentally I watched a month ago with his movie Dark Angel, I Come in Peace. It features the same director and has both main protagonists on leave from the force by suspension or whatnot. Hendrickson and Forsythe were tailor-fit to their roles, and on-screen chemistry with Bosworth was excellent. The soundtrack was very 90s and very much matches the overall theme of the movie. So I would recommend this to anyone wanting to be entertained for 90 minutes. It's no Sons of Anarchy, but much better. Live long and prosper, and yes, part 2 of Toys with Az on Robservations. Doc Vader. Well, thank you for that. So for those of you who don't know, one of my favorite YouTube channels that I like to watch is The Critical Drinker. And he graciously invited me to come on to a show this week to talk about Star Trek the Motion Picture on its 40th anniversary. Very, very exciting. And at the end, he talked about collaborating again, and he has a love for action films. I said, have you ever seen Stone Cold, directed by Craig Baxley, the stuntman turned director? And I said, why, it's got a cheesy lead, Brian Bosworth, former football player. It's got some really good stuff in it, and it's one of my favorites. And I'm glad, Doc Vader, you watched it, because I liked it. I thought it was good. I've always liked the film. Is it high art? Perhaps not. But for what it is, again, authorship, it knows what it wanted to be, and it was that thing. And it was great for it. This one comes from Dave, I think it's Dave Chappell. I think it's Dave Chappell. Dave Chappell says, "Hi, Rob. I have been a fan for a few years now, and this is my first letter, although I have sent many witty super chats." Well, thank you for that. Anyway, one thing stuck with me from a Gene Roddenberry interview on what makes a Star Trek story. What is it about? This is the key to what made Star Trek work. The story had to be about something. Essentially, why does this story need to be told? Modern Star Trek is not about anything. Also, why is this a story for Star Trek, not just a generic sci-fi story? Star Trek storytelling is very specific. I remember reading an interview about comic book writing, maybe from Denny O'Neil. Your story has to be specific. A Batman story should not work as a Wonder Woman story, for example. As we saw in the 1967-68 Prisoner series, prisoner stories are very specific stories to be prisoner stories. 2 episodes do not feel like prisoner stories, and the audience can feel it. Kurtzman Trek is not Star Trek because they're not about anything, and they're not Star Trek stories. Thanks for reading my letter, Rob. Live long live physical media, best wishes, Dave Chappell. Well, Dave, I think you're absolutely right. I agree with you. I mean, I watch the episodes and I wonder, what are these stories about? Other than people are always trying to make each other feel better on the show. What are they really about? So it's a little weird. A little weird. Don't know what to say about that. So yeah. Let's see. Hisham Durbis writes, and hope this letter finds you well and safe, Robert. It has been a while. Dubai is really busy this season. Have had a lot of catching up to do, particularly your current favorite TV show, Star Trek Discovery. Dun, dun, dun. That's written there. Dun, 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 in parentheses. One of my favorite 2-part episodes from The Next Generation was Unification. I loved how the story represented beautifully the dichotomy of nations and individuals and how both undergo similar conflicts. We had Spock and Sarek's separation of father and son due to years of differences, and Picard being the mediator to join them together. And in parallel, we had 2 cousins, worlds and nations colliding, separated by hundreds of years from war and bigotry and hatred, and ideals being mediated by Spock. In the end, while the unification doesn't take place but the seeds are planted, and even after death, the healing of unity between father and son begins, and nations thrive. Great writing, great characters, and memorable inspirations. Being Middle Eastern, I loved how this storyline could have represented the conflict that Palestinians and Israelis have had for 72 plus years. And the story actually inspired me, hoping that one day a mediatory with the logic of Spock can bring the cousins together. Jumping to the future, we have Unification 3. Sigh. I don't know, Rob. I genuinely don't know where to start. Do the writers of the show know Trek? Do they care? Or is it just a platform to push some sort of a woke agenda? I've got nothing against the cast. They deal with what they're given. But the characters. Where's the inspiration? To cleanse my palate and not feel dirty, I immediately watched the first DS9 I had on my DVD, and that happened to be The Siege, the 3-part story arc. And every minute I was being inspired by all the characters, making me clean again. I divert. But this is how infuriating Unification 3 made me. I had to immediately watch something inspiring. To make this letter short, 2 main things just rocked me. 1, Tilly's promotion and weak characters, and 2, the big one. Tilly's promotion. Tilly's promotion of first officer as a position but not rank defies military, naval, Star Trek protocol. Isn't there any officer on the ship that is qualified? What kind of captain accepts such a change in command? If anything, this further makes Saru a joke of a captain and really makes me question that modern Star Trek does not take the hierarchy seriously. Neither do they understand that people, to be in Starfleet, you have to be the best of the best. Inclusion does not promote people. Hard work, sacrifice, passing tests, and experience does. Not being a fan favorite. And what's with this crew of teenage behaving adults who keep crying in all the episodes? Never have I seen a crew of elites behave like teenagers like those on Discovery. Everyone has to be in hugs. Everyone has to share their emotions. Everyone has a self-confidence issue. What's with all the crying? If they're this insecure, how did they even leave space dock? Man, I don't know. That's one of my big problems with the show. None of the principal cast seems like they belong anywhere near a Federation starship. The big one. Once again, if it wasn't for the instance of Michael Burnham, the entire universe would implode. Unlike Kirk, who had Bones and Spock, or Picard having Riker and Data, or Troy, or Sisko having Dax and Kira, or Janeway having Tuvok and Chakotay, or even Archer having Trip and Phlox, Discovery has the Messiah herself, Michael. She will save us all by having a psychotic breakdown, giving melodramatic speeches, and crying in every episode to gain the audience love and absolve everyone from sin. You don't need any other character. Michael's enough. But you know what, Rob? That I can tolerate. I can accept her being the character she is. Very empowering. But what I cannot accept is bad writing. I cannot tolerate that cheap retcon sorry for an excuse line. And she wondered how much of the man Spock became was a result of who his sister was. In that moment, only rage consumed me. I spit on the TV and yelled, "Go fuck yourselves." I started ranting for the remainder of the episode. Even my wife, who never watched Star Trek but does know Spock because he is freaking Spock, after explaining my anger, told me, "That's just bad writing." Spock was Spock. He had an entire show, 6 movies, and an animation show, and multiple novels, books, and comics. This legendary character practically made Star Trek what it is in pop culture. I don't need anyone to retcon a character to tell me who Spock was. And no, Spock didn't have a disability. From a beautiful, high-level political storytelling and intimate father-son story to a messianic character that keeps crying. This is modern Trek. Well, to be fair, our modern age is full of people that whine and cry and moan and complain. Apologies for the rant, Rob, and seriously, where are the writers heading with this? And why is there a need to kill the past and retcon everything to make us love these new characters? Why can't they just write good characters and make us love them organically? I think I will take a break from modern Trek, Rob. I've equally despised Star Trek Picard, and don't get me started on Lower Decks. Luckily, I have my special edition DVDs of the original series, TNG, and DS9 to keep me warm. Salam from Dubai. Regards, Hisham Durbis. Well, Hisham, what do you mean you only have DVDs? Why don't you have my Blu-rays of The Next Generation I worked on? No, I'm just kidding. Actually, I'm not kidding, but you should have them. It's always nice to hear from Dubai. I've always wanted to go to Dubai. I really do kind of want to go outside on the Burj Khalifa and swing like Ethan Hutt did. It looks so much fun. I'd totally do that. So, yeah. Anyway, sounds good to me. You know, I think I'm going to bring this lovely episode, Robservations, episode number 500, and oh my God, 73 to a close. It's been a long road getting from here to there. I want to thank you for bearing with me for me rambling and prattling on this Friday afternoon, but it's been a lot of fun. I do want to tell everybody to watch the films on our page. They're at the top of the page on YouTube. Just go to the playlist. It's the first playlist, I believe, or you can just go to the YouTube page and it'll be there. Please go in and check out some of the films that have been made for the first annual Intergalactic Imagination Connoisseur Film Festival. There's going to be films being put up all week, and they are delightful. The film is going to go up Ascent. I really liked it. There's some really good, really clever people out there. So thank you for that. Please go check it out. I want to thank my moderating staff, beginning with, of course, Mike Bodden, and I want to thank The Richard for being The Richard and holding watch parties and being such a good cheerleader for the channel. So thank you, The Richard. I want to say thank MC Blackcap. Hey, Greg Smith is here. I was thinking about Greg Smith. For those of you who don't know, if you go back into the past of this channel, Greg Smith was the focus of the original Robservations episode 1, and he shows us his 1-to-1 scale land speeder that he built. Well, I was thinking about Greg Smith today because Greg Smith has a beautifully done, he's in the 501st, Boba Fett costume. And I was kind of laughing at him, but not just him. I was laughing at every cosplayer who's cosplays Boba Fett over the years, meticulously having to figure out how do you get all that armor damage. And spoiler alert, in today's episode of The Mandalorian, it looks like the Mando had some cleaning products around because, wow, now how do you make a canonical on-screen Boba Fett costume now? Wow, it was all spick and span. I thought it looked great. It looked a little weird though. It was weird seeing Boba Fett without all the metal and oxidized crap all over his armor. But I tweeted, I said, all those 501st cosplaying Boba Fett's, their voices were suddenly heard and silenced. No! I just cracked up. But Greg Smith, thanks for being here. And I don't know who else is here. Bunyan Snipes here. Thank you, Bunyan. Well, thanks to all the mods. It's awesome to have you. And you make the chat a fine place. As I said, I don't know what's going on with whining about movies. Elizabeth is in the midst of her finals. That's why they're whining about movies has slowed down. She ends next week, but she has been busting her ass on finals. So that's why we've slowed down. Hopefully we'll be back maybe tonight, but probably tomorrow with a movie I don't know yet. I'm still trying to figure that out. But anyway, I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting the channel through any tips and super chats and signing up and all that. The rules for the contest. But the most important thing, The Imagination Connoisseurs is the name of the book. Your story should be between 5,000 and 10,000 words. That doesn't mean 4,999. 5,000 and 10,000 words. But I want to thank you all for being here. And once again, remember, oh, wait a minute. You know what? I have people that have sent me in super chats that I have missed. So I'm going to go back and get them. Mr. Tickle Trunk says, yes, I'd love to see an interview with that porn director. I genuinely think it would be interesting. And yes, those are all real adult film titles. Well, yes, Eli Cross is a very interesting guy. I mean, he basically made a pornographic X-Files parody that's 5 hours long. And his sex scenes all last like 25 minutes. And they're pretty spectacular. And he has won AVN Awards for writing his screenplays. Keaton Toothman says, the film I'm uploading tonight is brand new and never been viewed or seen in its current form. I hope it'll be in the competition. We spent a lot of time. Oh, well, send it in. I have to ask you, though, I hope, did you fill out an entry form already? I hope you did. If not, contact me directly. You Know the Hero sends in a super chat. Well, You Know the Hero. I love the idea of Acolyte. Go dark side. I'm with you 100%. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. Look for episode 5 of Let's Get Physical Media. It'll drop this weekend. Episode 4 just went up today. Check that out. Dieter and I are certainly we're having fun making that show. And check it out. And also, these episodes are now available as a podcast. They are on Apple Podcasts. They are on Spotify. Waiting to find out about getting them onto Amazon and waiting to be approved by iHeartRadio. But you can get them wherever you get podcasts, I think. So there you go. So anyway, an end to this episode of Robservations. Thank you, one and all. And remember, as always, have a better day.